Good morning, students. Today's class is so long, so all of you cooperate with me. I will teach only the main points of the topic. All of you listen very carefully. Okay, start. First, Malabar Rebellion. The Malabar Rebellion in 1921 was a remarkable anti-British rebellion in Kerala. The tenants of Malabar faced several acts of injustice from the landlords like eviction. Eviction means kudiyozhippikal from agricultural land, imposition of heavy taxes and unaffordable share of the net agricultural produce. Unaffordable share means uyarna പാട്ടം. The British officials supported such actions of the landlords. This coincided with the non-cooperation movement and the Khilafat movement becoming active in Kerala. Gandhiji visited Kerala with Maulana Shaukat Ali. Malabar Rebellion in 1921 was an important incident relating to the Khilafat and non-cooperation movements. The farmers of Malabar faced several injustices from the landlords. These injustice actions of the landlords was supported the British officials. At the time of the Malabar Rebellion, the non-cooperation movement and the Khilafat movement becoming active in Kerala. At that time, Gandhiji visited Kerala with Maulana Shaukat Ali. Who is Maulana Shaukat Ali? The leader of Khilafat movement. The annual section of the Khilafat movement was held at Mancheri in 1920. This meeting created an awakening among the farmers. Majority of the farmers were Mappilas. At the peak of the anti-British and anti-landlord resentment, the people detained the police who arrived to arrest Vadake Vittil Muhammad, the secretary of the Pukotur Khilafat Committee. Vadake Vittil Muhammad, the secretary of the Pukotur Khilafat Committee. The people detained the arrest of Vadake Vittil Muhammad. Then also spread a rumor. Ali Musliar, a leader of the Khilafat movement, was arrested. These are the reasons that started this rebellion. It led to the outbreak of the rebellion in the taluks of Eranad, Valluvanad and Ponnani. The attempted arrest of Vadake Vittil Muhammad, the secretary of the Khilafat Committee, led to a series of violent clashes between the police and the Mappilas in the taluks of Eranad, Valluvanad and Ponnani. The famous leaders of Malabar Rebellion are Ali Musliar and Varian Kunnatha Kunyahamad Haji. These two leaders were executed by the British. Next, wagon tragedy. One of the tragic episodes of the rebellion was the wagon tragedy. Wagon tragedy is related to Malabar Rebellion. Around 90 fighters who had been arrested in the Malabar Rebellion were dispatched. Dispatched means kutti nirachu. It Coimbatore from Tirur railway station, stuffed into a freight goods wagon. Gasping for air, they clawed at each other in tormenting agony. അവർ പ്രാണന് വേണ്ടി പിടഞ്ഞു. ആ ട്രെയിനിൽ കുത്തി നിറച്ചു കൊണ്ടുപോയ ആളുകൾ, ആ ഗുഡ്സ് ട്രെയിനിൽ കുത്തി നിറച്ചു കൊണ്ടുപോയ ആളുകൾ എന്ത് ചെയ്തു? പ്രാണന് വേണ്ടി പിടഞ്ഞു. By the time the wagon reached Podanur near Coimbatore, 72 had died and the rest were struggling to stay alive. This inhuman event that happened on 10th November 1921 is known as the wagon tragedy. The British brutally suppressed the mass movements against landlordism and unjust administration. Next, Chaura Chaura incident. In 1922, The farmers of Chowri Chowra village in Uttar Pradesh organized a demonstration against the harsh measures of the British. The police opened fire at the procession of around 3,000 unarmed farms. The angry mob retaliated by burning down the police station, which resulted in the death of 22 policemen. Gandhiji called off the non-cooperation movement completely as the incident violated the principles of non-violent resistance. Chowri Chowra is a village in Uttar Pradesh. In 1922, when a peasant procession at Chowri Chowra in Uttar Pradesh was fired upon by the police. The angry mob set fire to the police station, killing 22 policemen. The Chowri Chowra incident led to the suspension of the non-cooperation movement by Gandhiji. Gandhiji called off the non-cooperation movement. Next, Vaishnav Satyagraha. The national movement evolved into a platform that opposed the social inequalities and strengthened the freedom struggle. The Avarnas were not allowed to use the public roads around the Vaishnav temple. The Vaishnav Satyagraha in 1924 urged for freedom of movement along these public roads for all sections of the society. Vaishnav Satyagraha was against untouchability and for the right to use the road before the Vaishnav temple by untouchables. There was a time when the low caste people had no freedom to use the public roads. The historic struggle organized to win this right is known as the Vaishnav Satyagraha. The Vaishnav Satyagraha was started on March 1924. In connection with the Satyagraha, Mannat Padmanabhan led the famous Savarna Jada. Savarna Jada is related to Vaishnav Satyagraha. Savarna Jada was led by Mannatha Padmanabhan. It is Savarna Jada extending support to the Vaishnav Satyagraha. A procession of Savarnas. Savarnas means upper caste Hindus led by Mannatha Padmanabhan set out from the Vaishnav temple to Thiruvananthapuram on 1st November 1924. They submitted a memorandum to Maharani Sethu Lakshmi Bai requesting the opening of all roads to the Vaishnav temple to all, irrespective of religion and caste. Supporting the Vaishnav Satyagraha, a Savarna Jada was led by Mannatha Padmanabhan from Vaishnav to Thiruvananthapuram. They submitted a memorandum to Maharani Sethu Lakshmi Bai. At that time, Maharani Sethu Lakshmi Bai is the ruler of Thiruvananthapuram. What was the request of that memorandum? Opening of all roads to the Vaishnav temple to all, irrespective of religion and caste. Vaishnav Satyagraha was a remarkable movement in India against the practice of untouchability in public places. Next, fearless of the hangman's rope. Thookukayarane bhayakathavar. Leaders like Chandrasekhar Azad, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev formed the Hindustan Republican Association. They formed an association named the Hindustan Republican Association. Who were formed this association? Chandrasekhar Azad, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev. What was the aim of this association? Preparing the youth for freedom struggle. They became the martyrs for the cause. ഇതിനുശേഷം മാട്രിയസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്? അവരെ തൂക്കിക്കൊന്നു അല്ലേ? നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടി ജീവൻ ബലി അർപ്പിച്ചവരാണ് ഈ 4 പേർ. ആരൊക്കെയാണ്? ചന്ദ്രശേഖർ ആസാദ്, ഭഗത് സിംഗ്, രാജ്ഗുരു ആൻഡ് സുഖ്ദേവ്. They formed an association named Hindustan Republican Association. What was the aim of this association? Preparing the youth for freedom struggle. A pinch of salt challenges an empire. The Congress session held at Lahore in 1929 decided to launch the civil disobedience movement under the leadership of Gandhiji. The aim of the movement was to disobey the unjust laws imposed by the British government. The Congress session held at Lahore in 1929 decided to start a new movement named Civil Disobedience Movement. This movement was started under the leadership of Gandhiji. What was the aim of this movement? Disobey the unjust laws. Unjust laws means Janaviruddha Niyamangal. Disobey the unjust laws imposed by the British government. The Indians had to pay tax for making salt. The doubling of the salt tax by the British government fueled the wrath of the people. Fueled the wrath of the people means Janarosham Vardhipikkuka. Gandhiji realized that salt can be used as a weapon to organize a stronger mass movement. He decided to disobey the salt law. The British levied high taxes on salt which Indians prepared on their own seashores. Those who do not pay taxes could be even imprisoned. This was the law. So, Gandhiji decided to disobey the salt law. Declaring the Salt Satyagraha, Gandhiji said, "Either I shall return with what I want or my dead body will float in the ocean." അദ്ദേഹം സാൾട്ട് സത്യാഗ്രഹത്തിന് തുടക്കം കുറിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് എന്താണ് പറഞ്ഞത്? ഒന്നുകിൽ ലക്ഷ്യം നേടി ഞാൻ തിരിച്ചു വരും, പരാജയപ്പെട്ടാൽ ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ജഡം സമുദ്രത്തിന് സംഭാവന നൽകും. Accompanied by 78 followers, Gandhiji set out from the Sabarmati ashramam and reached Dandi beach by marching 375 kilometers on foot. Gandhiji started a march from Sabarmati ashramam and reached Dandi beach. 78 followers accompanied by Gandhiji and they started a march from Sabarmati ashramam and reached Dandi beach. Gandhiji and his followers walked a long distance of about 375 kilometers on foot. On 6th April 1930, Gandhiji launched the civil disobedience movement by taking a handful of salt. On 6th April 1930, Gandhiji started the civil disobedience movement by taking a handful of salt. Then, salt came to symbolize the civil disobedience movement in the Indian freedom movement. Who were the Keralites participated in Dandi March? C. Krishnan Nair, Titus, Shankaran Eduthachen and Raghava Poduval were the Keralites who participated in the Salt Satyagraha with Gandhiji. C. Krishnan Nair, Titus, Shankaran Eduthachen and Raghava Poduval were the Keralites who participated in the Salt Satyagraha with Gandhiji. The civil disobedience movement spread all over India. The movement in the northwestern region was led by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, popularly known as Frontier Gandhi. Civil disobedience movement in the northwestern region was led by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. He was popularly known as Frontier Gandhi, Adirti Gandhi. Who is known as Frontier Gandhi? Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Several women were also active in the movement under the leadership of Sarojini Naidu. Several women also active in the civil disobedience movement under the leadership of Sarojini Naidu. The Queen of Nagas. The spirit of the civil disobedience movement spread to Manipur and Nagaland in northeast India. Impressed by the national movement, the 13-year-old Gaidiliu participated in the civil disobedience movement. Acknowledging her role in the freedom struggle, Jawaharlal Nehru described her as the Queen of Nagas. A 13-year-old girl, Gaidiliu participated in the civil disobedience movement in the northeast part of India. Jawaharlal Nehru described Gaidiliu as the Queen of Nagas. Next, Kerala and the Salt Satyagraha. The prominent leaders of the Salt Satyagraha campaign in Kerala were K. Madhavan Nair and E. Moidu Maulavi. The prominent leaders of Salt Satyagraha in Kerala were K. Madhavan Nair and E. Moidu Maulavi. The major centers of the Salt Satyagraha in Kerala were Kozhikode and Payyanur in Kannur. Major centers of Salt Satyagraha in Kerala, Kozhikode and Payyanur in Kannur. The breaking of the salt law was organized in Payyanur under the leadership of K. Kelappan. The breaking of salt law was organized in Payyanur under the leadership of K. Kelappan. K. Kelappan is known as Kerala Gandhi. Muhammad Abdur Rahman and P. Krishnapilla, who led the Salt Satyagraha at the Kozhikode beach, were injured in the police lathi charge. Who led Salt Satyagraha at Kozhikode? Muhammad Abdur Rahman and P. Krishnapilla. Who led Salt Satyagraha at Payyanur? K. Kelappan. Muhammad Abdur Rahman and P. Krishnapilla led the Salt Satyagraha at the Kozhikode beach. They were injured in the police lathi charge. The Salt Satyagraha fanned means aalikathga. The Salt Satyagraha fanned the flames of the freedom movement among the people of Kerala. The British decided to suppress the Salt Satyagraha by all means. Thousands of people, including leaders like Gandhiji, Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, were arrested related to Salt Satyagraha. Next, Guruvaya Satyagraha. Guruvaya Satyagraha was started on 1st November 1931. The aim of Guruvaya Satyagraha was to enable all sections of Hindus to enter temples. Gandhiji requested the trustee of the Guruvaya temple, Samorin, opened the temple to all Hindus irrespective of caste. But the Samorin rejected Gandhiji's request. In order to reject the request of Gandhiji, K. Kelappan went on a hunger strike before the temple. The major leaders of Guruvaya Satyagraha were K. Kelappan, P. Krishnapilla and A. K. Gopalan. Guruvaya Satyagraha that began with the moral support of Gandhiji resulted in securing for all Hindus the right to enter temples. Gandhiji gave moral support to Guruvaya Satyagraha. What was the result of the Guruvaya Satyagraha? Securing for all Hindus the right to enter temples. Next, Ambedkar and Pune Act. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was prominent among the leaders who set out to politically empower the depressed classes in India. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar works for the empower of the depressed classes. He recognized that the liberation of the depressed classes may be possible only through their participation in administration. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar realized that the freedom of the depressed classes possible only through their participation in administration. So, he decided to participate in the roundtable conferences. Where was roundtable conferences held? In London. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar participated in roundtable conferences and he urged the British government. It involved the depressed classes in administration as a remedy to their social backwardness. He participated in the roundtable conferences and he urged the British government what? It involved the depressed classes in administration. Roundtable conferences. The British government organized the roundtable conferences to discuss issues related to India in 1930, 31 and 32. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar participated in all three conferences. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar participated in all three conferences. 1930, 1931 and 32. These years held roundtable conferences in London. Gandhiji took part in the second one. Gandhiji participated in the second roundtable conferences. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar participated all the roundtable conferences years 1930, 31 and 32. The British government reserved separate electorate for the depressed classes. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar demanded the British government to involve the depressed classes in administration. As a result, the British government decided to reserve separate electorate for the depressed classes. Sensing that the separate electorate would alienate means ഒറ്റപ്പെടുത്തുക, would alienate the depressed classes from the mainstream of society. So, Gandhiji decided to protest by fasting until death. Gandhiji believed that this special electorate would alienate the depressed classes from the mainstream of society. Gandhiji strongly opposed the idea of separate electorate for depressed classes. So, Gandhiji decided to protest by fasting until death. To resolve the issue of the political right of the depressed classes, Gandhiji and Ambedkar met and reached a consensus. Consensus means കൂടിക്കാഴ്ച. To give up the separate electorates and to increase the number of reserved electorates for the depressed classes in the legislature. To solve the problem of the political right of the depressed classes, then Gandhiji and Ambedkar met. Then they reached a consensus and then they decided to give up. Give up means ഉപേക്ഷിക്കുക. They decided to give up the special electorates and it increased the number of reserved electorates for depressed classes in the legislature. They decided to give up the separate electorates and then they decided to increase the number of reserved electorates for the depressed classes in the legislature. This agreement in 1932 is known as the Pune Pact. Gandhiji and Ambedkar signed the Pune Pact. This agreement is in 1932. This agreement is known as Pune Pact. What was the agreement? They decided to give up the separate electorates for the depressed classes and then they decided to increase the number of reserved electorates for depressed classes in the legislature. This agreement is known as Pune Pact. Today's first section of the class is winding up.